Go ahead, Jim. All right. Thank you all for coming. It's always a pleasure to be at the East Cleveland Public Library. My comments will be rather brief. I'll try to keep them to around 10 minutes. As some of you know, I've been accused at times of not being succinct. Tonight we will be succinct. What we're talking about today is of the greatest consequence, not just for the people of East Cleveland, but for Black America. And so, let us begin. So first I would like to thank Mr. William Fambro, who's also a member of the Board of Trustees, who is really the reason that I became engaged in the city of East Cleveland to begin with. Mr. William Fambro, who's there, manning the camera, who also is the owner and operator of Legacy Communications, is the first person who informed me of an effort very similar to the effort that is afoot now. And that was an effort to have the library that we sit in right now, the East Cleveland Public Library, annexed by the Cuyahoga County Library System. So this is my initial engagement in the city of East Cleveland. When I was told by William Fambro that this effort was afoot, I had no knowledge of the fiscal situation of the library system. I had no knowledge of how trustees became trustees, but I had an understanding that every time that I am aware of when communities that were predominantly Black lost control or even a bit of control over institutions within their community, that they were always the losers, that they were never the beneficiaries, that this would happen again. So I was intent not upon deciding whether or not, even before I was able to gain the information that we subsequently gained, to wage a campaign and win that campaign to keep our library system independent. I was disposed to fight for it anyway, whatever the consequences and whatever the cost. So we were able to do that. Now, this is relevant to this situation. It's very relevant to fight for our library system because we saw the same sorts of things and we heard the same sorts of arguments that we are hearing now. We were told at the time that our library was in debt, massive debt. And there had been a massive debt situation at the library. That was not a false thing, that happened. We were told that the revenue situation in the city of East Cleveland was bad and would get worse, that there would be declining revenues, and to an extent that there were declining revenues. And we were told that because of these things, the library system by the year 2012, if you tried to keep it independent, by the end of that year we would be $800,000 in the red and unable to even open our doors in 2013. So they didn't even project what our debt would be. This was the supposed experts under best case scenarios. We were, however, able to keep our library system independent. Myself, William Fambro, and others held forums such as this, forums in churches. We went to every single school board meeting to the point to where I'm sure they got tired of hearing us. But we went to every school board meeting and we made the argument for independence, and we said that not only can this system remain independent in spite of the budgetary concerns, but this can become a model institution, that this can be an institution that reflects the highest aspirations of Black people. And it has. Now, not only were we able to remain independent through 2013, we entered in 2015 in spite of the cuts, in spite of not having received a single dollar in grant funding. And in spite of declining revenues, not only did we not close for 2013 or 2014, we entered into 2015 with approximately $1 million surplus. And now, and that's not under ideal circumstances. As many in this community know, we had a great number of challenges. We had a complete vacancy on the Board of Trustees. The previous Board of Trustees resigned en masse. So those of us who fought to keep the library independent, we were intending to come upon the board if that opportunity arose, but with some degree of tutelage in effect from the remaining members who were senior. They all left. So we were a membership with no senior leadership in effect. We were people running the Board of Trustees, all 7 members replaced within 1 year. We had a lot of internal turmoil. Lots of money was wasted as a consequence of that turmoil, but in spite of that turmoil, we were able to move forward. And then there are other things that are important that aren't just the financial things. If we look on that stage there, the left-hand side of the stage, we see the Pan-African flag designed by Marcus Garvey. Those of you who come to library board meetings know that we start every library board meeting by standing, the board members and the audience, facing that flag and singing the Black National Anthem. And that is how we start every single meeting of the Board of Trustees. Now, tell me a city where that happens in America besides East Cleveland. When you go to the school board meeting, you see the same flag. Tell me a city where that happens besides East Cleveland. Now, there are other reasons to remain independent. And for me, it's not a question of weighing options. For me, independence is the honorable solution. To me, there are difficulties that we should not gloss over. We will be facing challenges, but one of the challenges that I think we need to mention that's relevant for these times, where we look at what's going on in Baltimore now, what has happened in Ferguson, and what happened down the street here in East Cleveland, where 62, people talk about this one officer facing charges, one officer of 13 who drove into, and really not of 13, one of 62 officers who drove through our city, disregarding their own law and ours, disregarding the safety of our Black residents, and then drove into our middle school parking lot and fired 137 shots at 2 unarmed and defenseless people. Do you want that police to be your police force? Do we want those officers, the other 12 of that 13 who are not on trial now, to be patrolling our streets? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. We mentioned the fact that we have our own judge, Judge Dawson. I don't know if the judge is still here, but the judge is not only an intelligent person who believes in restorative justice, he's a young Black man who lives in this community and who interacts on a regular basis with the people in this community. So this is a fundamental difference. People talk about, well, you know, majority Black government is irrelevant. They got it in Baltimore, didn't stop what happened. Different scenario altogether. As Cassie mentioned, we have access to government that no people, no Black community in America similarly situated has more access to government than we have here. We have an elected school board. We have an elected school board. And I am glad that we have an elected school board. We have not always seen eye to eye, but they were elected by the they were elected by the totality of the residents, the overwhelming majority of whom being Black. But the interesting dynamic, when we talked about the statistics of being a 95% Black community, we are a Black community, we are a pro-Black community, but we are not hostile to our non-Black residents. So much so that we have an elected white member on our school board. So in a 95% Black community, we still elect non-Blacks to positions of responsibility in our community. But in addition to that, we have a balance, a gender balance as well. We have on the school board female leadership elected by our population. And see, this has been a criticism in some cases that has been leveled in academia about those who focus on Black self-determination, that it's hostile to female interest. Look at our city. Look at East Cleveland. Who are the most influential political figures in East Cleveland? And tell me they're not female. Now, I see Nate inching his way here. So we're going to be wrapping up because I think we have to be realistic too, though. We have challenges. It's not as if the challenges are going to disappear if it comes to the ballot, and I hope it does not come to the ballot, because I question the legitimacy of a single signature on a petition for independence when people are told it was for a study, when it says specifically that it is an affirmation of one's support for annexation. So I would say that every signature was signed potentially under false pretenses. And so I hope it never comes to a vote. But if it does come to a vote, we should go among our people, every one of them, young and old, get the 18-year-olds in Shaw registered to vote. Ask them if they want to be the next Mike Brown. Ask them if they want to be the next Tamir Rice. Ask them if the police that gunned down Tamir Rice, that gunned down my 17-year-old brother-in-law, because before I was a trustee on the library board, I was the leader of the Coalition Against Police Brutality. And several times in confrontation with that force, several times accustomed to the brutality, to the racism that exists now, that will exist tomorrow there. Because we don't just have a black city because of its size. We have a capacity to participate without money. Brandon King was elected to council, raised no money. We have other people elected to council. Tiffany Fisher elected to school board. I saw her with the sign. She had a sign with paper, a paper sign, a couple flyers, passing them out, just walking in the community. You don't need money to be civically engaged in the city of East Cleveland. And our city council representatives are truly public servants. They don't make $70,000 a year. In fact, the whole council taken together, including, make not the salary of a single council person in the city of Cleveland. Together. So they are citizen servants, in effect. Now, we don't always agree with every decision that they make, but we know that they're not making it to hold their big paycheck. You know, we know as trustees of the library, we serve with no compensation. We know that when members of the community had differences with us, they came to our meetings and could access us. We know that when we have differences with our current mayor, we can access him, sometimes more than he would like, you know, but we can access our political leadership here. That is the difference. Not just having a black community, but having a black community where the poor community can influence the politics of that community. So don't surrender that. If you surrender that, that is a fundamental loss. That is a defeat from which you cannot just walk back. So don't surrender. So stand strong. The worst has already been endured. Now, we will have to re-envision the way services are provided here, perhaps. Absolutely. We will have to re-envision the concept of citizenship and neighborliness here. But we can do that. We can do that. We did that. Think about, and I will be closing, but think about what happened when we had the situation where we had a copycat of a savage in Cleveland, where we had a copycat serial killing situation. 3 of our young women were murdered. It didn't take years to find them or their killer, or their alleged killer to not be considered libelous or what have you. People are litigious these days, but it took hours. Once the first person was found, within, I believe, 2 hours, we had someone in custody. But then not just that, members of the community went through almost every neighborhood, almost every block, walking through those yards. Police doing the job of the police themselves. We have a capacity to have not just a say, but a real people's democracy here. That exists very few places. Do not surrender it. Stand strong. Hold the line. Hold the line. Keep faith in yourselves and in your people. And if we fight for that which is ours, we will win. Thank you very much.